Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Sri Maitreya said, O learned Vidura, so far I have explained to you the glories of the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his feature of Kala. Now you can hear from me about the creation of Brahma, the reservoir of all Vedic knowledge. Brahma first created the nascent engagements like self deception, the sense of death, anger after frustration, the sense of false ownership, and the illusory bodily conception or forgetfulness of one's real identity. Purport. Before the factual creation of the living entities in different varieties of species, the conditions under which a living being in this material world has to live were created by Brahma. Unless a living entity forgets its real identity, it is impossible for him to live in the material conditions of life. Therefore, the first condition of material existence is forgetfulness of one's real identity. And by forgetting one's real identity, one is sure to be afraid of death, although a pure living soul is deathless and birthless. This false identification with material nature is the cause of false ownership of things, which are offered by the arrangement of superior control. All material resources are offered to the living entity for his peaceful living and for the discharge of the duties of self realization in conditioned life. But due to false identification, the conditioned soul becomes entrapped by the sense of false ownership of the property of the Supreme Lord. Due to false identification, the conditioned soul becomes entrapped by the sense of false ownership of the property of the Supreme Lord. It is evident from this verse that Brahma himself is a creation of the Supreme Lord, and the five kinds of nescience which condition the living entities in material existence are creations of Brahma. It is simply ludicrous to think that living entity to be equally the Supreme Being when one can understand that the conditioned souls under the influence of Brahma's magic wand. The Patanjali also accepts that there are five kinds of nescience as mentioned herein. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport. So we are in the starting of the new chapter from the third canto. So the name of the chapter is Creation of the Kumaras and Others. So in the previous chapter, the 11th chapter of the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which titled was Calculation of Time from the Atom. So in that Maitreya Muni described about the one function of the Lord or one type of energy of the Lord in the form of Kala. So then how to understand time from the atom. So Maitreya Muni describes about atomic time to universal time, how it differs, and in both the cases, whether it is atomic time or universal time, atomic time in the sense, the time required for travel, sun rays to travel from one atom to from one atom to another atom. So that is a atomic time, and then universal time, like Brahma's, huge span of living years. So after describing all those things, so towards the end, the last verse of the previous chapter, it ends with, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Sri Krishna is therefore said to be the original cause of all causes. Thus the spiritual abode of Vishnu is eternal without a doubt, and it is also the abode of Mahavishnu, the origin of all manifestations. So it ends with proving that the supremacy of the Lord Sri Krishna or Mahavishnu, abode of Mahavishnu. So now in this chapter, basically in the previous chapter it was established that previous chapter and even before that, the creations which were done by the Supreme Lord. Actually the material manifestation starts from the Supreme Lord's glancing. So from after the glancing, how different material elements were created. So in this chapter, after the Lord's task of the material creation, the next task is Brahma's task. Supreme Lord has whatever he has to create the basic platform, including Brahma. So that is being done. So the next level of creation, which is carried out by Brahma, that is being explained from this chapter onwards. So in the first verse of this today's, which we read, so Maitreya Vacha, Itite Varnitam Kshatha. Itite, so far I have described, Varnita means described. So here Kshatha refers to whom? Kshatha means Vidura. It is referring to Vidura in different places in Srimad Bhagavatam. Actually, Maitreya addresses him as Kshatta. So I think more than 4 5 places in Bhagavatam this Kshatta word is mentioned for Vidura. So itite Varnita Kshatta. Oh Vidura, so far I have described what he has described. Kalakya Paramatmanaha. So Kala Akhya, by the eternal time, Paramatma of the Super Soul. So I have described what he has described, the glories of the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his feature of Kala. So far I have explained the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his feature of Kala. So now, Mahima Veda Garbho Tha Yatha Shraksha Nibodame. So Nibodam again, just try to understand. So he's telling that now try to understand about Lord Brahma, who is mentioned here as Veda Garbha. Mahima Veda Garbhota. Mahima means glories. Mahima means glories. Glories of Lord Brahma. So, who is the reservoir of all Vedic knowledge, are known as Veda Garbha. So, this Veda Garbha, Prabhupada in another place in Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd canto, 4th chapter, Prabhupada gives an actual definition of what is Veda Garbha. So, the verse is Etat Evatma Bhurajan Naradhaya Vipruchate Veda Garbho Bhyadrak Sakshat Yed Aha Harir Atmanaha. So here the translation goes like this. My dear king, Brahma, the firstborn, on being questioned by Narada, exactly appraised him on this subject as it was directly spoken by the Lord to his own son, who was impregnated with a Vedic knowledge from his very birth. So one meaning of Veda Garbha here in the word-to-word meaning also Prabhupada translates as name of Lord Brahma, the reservoir of the Vedas. So why he is known as Veda Garbha? So one definition is that it was direct, the Bhagavatam, the entire Vedic knowledge was spoken by the Lord to his own son, Brahma, and was impregnated with Vedic knowledge from his very birth. That's why he is known as Veda Garbha. So in the purport, Prabhupada gives even a more accurate definition for Veda Garbha. As soon as Brahma was born of the abdominal lotus petals of Vishnu, he was impregnated with a Vedic knowledge, and therefore he is known as Veda Garbha, or a Vedantist from the embryo. Vedantist from the embryo. So when he was there, impregnated with Vedic knowledge, in the very time he was born, when he was born from the abdominal lotus petals of Vishnu. So from that time he was impregnated with Vedic knowledge. That's why he is known as Vedantist from embryo. So that's the Maitreya is addressing Brahmaji as Veda Garbha, and he's explaining now. From now onwards, I'll start explaining about the creation done by Lord Brahma. So far, Lord's creation was explained. Now, creation done by Brahma will be explained. So, in that creation, what is the first thing which Brahma does? Sasar Jagre. Sasar Jagre means created at first. In the first step, in the process of Brahma's starting process of creation, what he does is that Sasar Jagre Andathamishram. Then Atatamishram Adikrit. So Andatamishram, then Tamishra, then Mahamoha, Moha, then Tamas. So in the translation, Prabhupada mentions, Brahma first created the nascent engagements like self-deception, the sense of death, anger after frustration, the sense of false ownership, and illusory bodily conception or forgetfulness of one's real identity. So, the very first line of purport, Prabhupada clarifies that why Brahmaji created these things first before creating any other living entities. Before the factual creation of the living entities in different varieties of species, the conditions under which a living being in the material world has to live were created by Brahma. Unless a living entity forgets his real identity, it is impossible for him to live in the material conditions of life. So very important, before the living being is brought to this material world, first he has to first forget about his original position, and second thing is that he has to, this body has to be prepared to accommodate these tribulations in this material world. So once I had some stomach problem, some kind of pain in the stomach. So then I went to one specialist who is an expert in, I think it's known as endos, that who deals with the stomach related. He has his own hospital. So another devotee had come with me actually, one who has already undergone such a treatment. So he had taken me to that hospital. S.R. Kallaji. Many devotees visit that doctor. So when I went, he wrote one test. So in the test, the moment I went, the devotee cautioned me, Prabhu, when you are going for this, is be prepared. You will have some very awkward experience. So he just cautioned me. There was no much time. Then immediately they called me inside. So that attendant he came and he gave me one injection. While he was injecting, he told me, महाराज आप इस दुनिया को अभी भूल भूल जाने वाले हैं. आप पूरा एंजॉय करो. जो आप देखते हो ना चैंटिंग करके जो आप एंजॉय करते हो वो थोड़ा आपको एक ग्लिम्स मिलेगा अभी. So that was basically anesthesia. I was not knowing that. So he gave me anesthesia. Within seconds, I completely fell off. In the sense, I slept off. I don't know what is happening around the world. Then, after a few minutes, I don't know how many minutes I was unconscious. So then I woke up. When I woke up, I was feeling like vomiting. Something unusual is happening in my throat. So then, and because of that dizziness, and because just I woken up from anesthesia, I'm not able to stand, and I'm feeling like vomiting. Then devotee he held my hand, he took me, and he made me sat. And I said, no, I want to vomit. No, 2 minutes रुकिए, हो जाएगा, ठीक हो जाएगा, ठीक हो जाएगा. Basically, what he had done, so to see inside the stomach, the doctor has written the test. So they have an equipment. There is like X-ray or any other CT scan. So this is also one test. They have a camera fitted to one tube. So after giving anesthesia, just remember after anesthesia, they put one clamp in my mouth. My mouth was wide open and they had put one clip so that mouth cannot close. So they had put that camera inside the stomach through that one tube, and they were actually examining what is there what is the issue within the stomach. So that's the reason they put anesthesia and they put some chemicals and all. That's the reason when I woke up I was feeling vomiting. So then I was recollecting that what that attender said, महाराज आप सब कुछ भूल जाने वाले हैं अभी, आप तो अभी दूसरा दुनिया देखोगे. So without giving anesthesia, those kind of activities cannot be done. It's very ugra karma, putting something through your mouth to the stomach. It's a completely opposite of the natural any other treating methods. So one has to be given anesthesia, then only those kind of tests can be conducted. Similarly, Brahmaji, before bringing those, before the living entities come to this world, is creating such an anesthetic environment. What is that anesthesia environment? Andha Tamishra, Andha, Moha, Mahamoha. These are all the conditions, these are all the 5 different varieties of conditions in this world which make the living entity completely forget about his real identity and think that I am the enjoyer in this world. Just imagine sometimes when we are walking by, say, Jalana Dungri or Jawahar Nagar, that Kachi Basti area. So some people fully drunk and laying on the roadside, or sometimes we also hear they will be laying on the drainage in the corporation drainages and all. So how can a person, when we feel so, even animals also, to some extent animals like cows are also very sensitive about cleanliness. How come this fellow being being a human being can lie down on that such a filthy place? So this is what the fellow, after drinking, he goes into that condition. He thinks that I'm floating somewhere in Ganges water. So that is one example. Similarly, here each and every, we are laughing at that person, but actually everyone's of our condition is same. We have left that the reservoir of all spiritual qualities, the spiritual world, and we have come to this world. So we have been given that kind of anesthesia before we brought into this world. That's how we are able to really enjoy. Otherwise, one place Prabhupada says, the spirit soul or any material qualities cannot touch the spirit soul. Spirit soul being the Satchit Ananda, it cannot come in contact with any of the material qualities. But how it is happening? So it's because of the deep ignorance. So Brahma, even before start creating any other living entities, he created the situations for living entities to stay in this world. It's also said that when a sinful person is being taken to Yamaloka, so he has to undergo different punishments. So different punishments like he's put into the boiling oil in the fire, and so many rodents or so many insects are there, they are biting you. So just imagine if you are put into a boiling oil, like samosa, boiling, samosa getting fried. How can we tolerate? So to tolerate that pain, a different kind of body is given, because all the gross body, the five elements are burnt to ashes in this world. Then only subtle body has gone to the hellish planets. So in that to that subtle body, they are a different kind of a body is given, which can withhold, or which can sustain that kind of punishments. So then the punishments are given. Similarly here, so living entity also, before it is brought here, Brahmaji is creating these conditions, the platforms. So what are those? First one is the self-deception, that is Andhathamishram. Then the sense of death. Sense of death is what? Actually, Andhathamishram only, sense of death. Anger after frustration, that is proper translate as Tamishram. Then sense of false ownership, that is Mahamoham, ownership of enjoyable objects. And then Moham, illusory conception. Then Agnana, that is in essence. So all these engagements, illusory bodily concepts are forgetfulness of one's real identity. So these things are created. Then only the living entity can actually think that, okay, let me try to enjoy this world. Being in his original position, he cannot think. So this is what Brahmaji in this verse, starting from this verse in this chapter, is describing. So further Prabhupada mentions, the first condition of material existence is forgetfulness of one's real identity. And by forgetting one's real identity, one is sure to be afraid of death. That is the first principle, that is the self-deception, the sense of death. So when a living entity forgets about his real identity, what is the real identity? As a spirit soul, he never undergoes any birth or death. So then, because of that conception of this thing, what happens? Forgetting one's real identity, one is sure to be afraid of death, although a pure living soul is deathless and birthless. Then second one, the false identification with material nature is the cause of false ownership of things which are offered by the arrangement of superior control. Then all material resources are offered to the living entity for his peaceful living and for the discharge of the duties of self-realization in the conditioned life. So very important line. So all these resources, basically these are also resources. What? Andhathamishra is also one resource in this material world. So that soul can really understand, at least after reading Srimad Bhagavatam, a person can understand that, what is this actually condition is. So why all these facilities are given in this material world, the resources are given, because the living entity, so he can live peacefully and discharge the duties of self-realization in conditioned life. So that he can come out of these things, discharge the duties of conditioned life means what? Jivera Swarupai Nitya Krishna Das, Saru Krishna, and go back to this world, finish the business in this material world and go back to the spiritual world. For that purpose, all these material different facility resources are given. But what happens? But due to false identification, resources are given for some purpose, but due to false identification, the conditioned soul becomes entrapped by a sense of false ownership, that is Mahamoha, sense of false ownership of the property of the Supreme Lord. So if really, okay, everyone comes to this world because of rebellious nature because of his rebellion against the Supreme Lord. So even at least after coming here, after thoroughly understanding that this is not a place for enjoyment, so spirit soul should really understand and start serving Krishna. But otherwise what happens? They start enjoying the Krishna's property as if it is my own property. He forgets that it is Krishna's property and it is to be utilized for the pleasure or service of Krishna. So that's why Prabhupada says, Jada Vidya Mayar Vaibhav. So Jada Vidya, this Jada means what? It's material things are known as Jada. They don't have life. So that Vidya, this makes a person so ignorant. Then he starts thinking that I'm really enjoying. But whereas opposite of Jada Vidya is what? Brahma Vidya. So Brahma Vidya means the knowledge about Supreme Brahman, knowledge about oneself. What I am supposed to do, that is known as Brahma Vidya. But they completely forget. Because of all the principles, or because of all the conditions which Brahmaji is creating here. It is simply ludicrous to think the living entity to be equal with a supreme being when one can understand that the conditioned souls are under the influence of Brahma's magic wand. Here, in the previous chapter, it's mentioned that even Brahma himself is a creation by the Garbhodakashaya Vishnu. He himself is a product of the creation of the Supreme Lord. Then further, Brahma is creating all these conditions. After creating this, he is created Prajapatis. Through Prajapatis or through Manus, all other different Manushas, different living entities have come into being. So this is what is the fact. But what we start thinking that Prabhupada is mentioning that it's ludicrous to think living entity to be equal with the supreme being when one can understand that conditioned souls are under the influence of Brahma's magic wand. So we are under the we are completely under the control of Brahmaji's creation, whatever Brahma we have heard in this verse, and that Brahma is created by Supreme Lord, and conditioned soul in his ignorant condition, what he thinks, he himself to be equal to the Supreme Lord. This is known as Mahamoha. So easily we can understand that in how significant the living entities are. But the influence of this Mahamoha is so severe that he starts thinking, I am equal to the Supreme Lord. Sometimes they think even I am greater than the Lord. No one exists beyond me. I am the most powerful. So this is known as Mahamoha. So here, Andhatamishra actually, another definition is there. Andhatamishra is what? It's a darkest region of hell. Definition, name of the place. So very, very dark. So their living entities put into that darkness for so many years. Just imagine if you are, told to live in a dark place. You are not able to see anyone, not able to talk with anyone. There are many experiments where a human being is put into a room with doesn't know where is the door. There are so many experiments like that. These are all social experiments to prove that human being is a social animal. He cannot live without other living entities. Living entities includes human beings, animals, other conditions. Even if you money is given, food is given, everything is given, but you cannot live alone. So, but just imagine if you are put into the darkest region, no light at all, you will go crazy. So that's known as Andhatamishra. So this the subject matter of cosmic creation, the creation of the cosmic manifestation is discussed in many bits and pieces in many places in Srimad Bhagavatam. Second canto also described. Third canto, fifth and sixth chapter again describes about these things. Then the series which we are reading again describing about only the creation. Similarly, in the next third canto, 20th chapter also, same discussion, same creation is being discussed. So in that, when Maitreya Muni, same between Maitreya Muni and Vidura, that is being described there. So in the discussion between Maitreya and Vidura, same subject matter what we discussed will again be repeated. So in the series, conversation between Maitreya and Vidura, it describes about how the Supreme Lord glances into the Mahatattva. Then after the Supreme Lord glance, Mahatattva comes into action. So then after the action, different elements like earth, water, fire, all these things, they are created. Then different senses, sense objects of senses, all these things are created. Then Garbhodakashaya Vishnu creates Lord Brahmaji. Then when the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is lying on the Garbhodaka ocean, entered the heart of Brahma, Brahma brought his intelligence to bear, and with intelligence invoked, he began to create the universe as it was before. So everything is annihilated, so he has to create before. So next verse it says about Sasarja Chayaya Vidyam Pancha Parvanam Agrataha Tamishram Anda Tamishram Tamo Moha Tamaha. So what we discussed, Anda Tamishra, Moha, Andha, then Mahamoha. Same subject matter, Bhagavatam is describing again in the 20th chapter. Sasarja, like today also it was meant, Sasarja Agra, before the creation. So Chaya means shadow. Chayaya avidyan, ignorance. So Chaya means the shadow, Brahmaji with his own shadow. From his own shadow, which represents the ignorance, he created what? Pancha Parvanam Agrataha. He created 5 different conditions. What are those? Tamishram, Andatamishram, Tamo, Moha, and Mohatamaha. So same. So in that purport, Prabhupada actually elaborately describes about what are these 5 conditions. How a living entity, stage by stage, get into that kind of complete illusion. The last one is Mahamoha. So starting from Tamishram to Moham, how living entity transfers his consciousness. So that Prabhupada explains here. In the translation, first of all, Brahma created from his shadow the coverings of ignorance of the conditioned souls. These are known as coverings of ignorance. Spirit soul has 5 kinds of ignorant covers. So they are 5 in numbers and are called Tamishra, Andatamishra, Tamas, Moha, and Mahamoha. So Prabhupada explains each one in an elaborate way. So conditioned soul comes to this world to enjoy sense gratification, to enjoy this material world. That is the reason for which he has come here. So are covered in the beginning by 5 different conditions, are 5 different ignorant covers. So the first condition is called Tamishra or anger. Like in today's verse also it mentions about sense of anger. So the Tamishra means anger. Then constitutionally, each and every living entity has minute independence. It is misuse of that minute independence for the conditioned soul to think that he can also enjoy the Supreme Lord, or to think that why shall I not be free enjoyer like the Supreme Lord. So the first condition is what? Tamishra or anger. So yesterday class also we heard this Harishet Varkas. How that 6 different the qualities in this world affects the living soul. So first one is what? Harishet Vargas. Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Madha, and Matsarya. So Madhubani Prabhu explained all the 6 principles, how one by one they are connected. So Kama, lust. Even Bhagavad Gita also Krishna says about this lust. What is that? Lust and anger. Kama Esha, Krodha Esha. Arjuna asks a question, why a living being acts as if he is forced, even though he does not want to act sinfully, but he acts as if he is forced. Someone is forcing him. What is that? Then answer Krishna says, Kama Yesha, Krodha Yesha, Rajo Guna Samudbhavaha. It is lust only, Arjuna. When it gets mixed, when it interacts with the modes of ignorance and passion, it turns into Vrat or anger, Krodha. So Kama becomes Krodha. So Kama has 2 functions. Kama, if it is satisfied, it will become greed, Lobha. Kama, so in this material world, if you get 1 rasgulla, 2 rasgulla, 5 rasgullas, for today you will say, okay, I'm done. Even if I'll give 1 lakh rupees, eat 1 more rasgulla, it will be very difficult. But whereas very next day, that doesn't mean that your desire to eat rasgulla is completely satiated. It is just a momentary, satisfaction. Very next day morning, if you give rasgulla, yes, I'll take it again. That's the nature of lust in this world. Lust is never satisfied. So if it is lust, if it is satisfied, if it is fulfilled, it turns into lobha, greed. We want more. And lust, if it is not satisfied, it becomes krodha. That's what Krishna addresses. That when it is not satisfied, kama yesha, krodha yesha, rajoguna samudbhavaha. Because of the influence of Rajoguna and Tamoguna, it becomes Krodha. So then, after either Krodha or Lobha, these 2 things, then comes what? Moha. So we develop, say suppose if we are enjoying that sense object, we develop a kind of attachment for that sense object. That is known as Lobha. So because of the attachment, what comes? Madha. I am the possessor. I am having this. If you don't get, you will become angry. If you get it, that madha comes. There's a word in Vedic literature known as madhanda. Ravana was referred to as madhanda. Madhanda means one who has become, whose vision has become blinded because of the pride. Too much pride will cover the real intelligence of a person. That's why we should. One of the qualities that Adam Bitvam, Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita, he says that one should be prideless. Adambara means pride basically. So then, moha, then comes madha. So because of Mada, a person become completely ignorant. That's why known as Madha Andha. Mada Andha. Then comes Matsarya. So Matsarya, how from Mada it comes to Matsarya? It was giving in Prabhupada in another example, in another context, he explains that when you have something, very next thing happens what? Comparison with others. If you have with others, you will become more pride. Oh, he doesn't have. But if he has more than you, what will become? It becomes Matsarya. Will start envious about that person. We start become envious of that person that he is having more in quantity than me in any of the aspects. So these are the Harishet Vargas which blinden us. So that is the known as anger, that is the Tamishra. So the next condition is Andha Tamishra. That means Andha Tamishra is anger, then Andha Tamishra. That means person is completely become ignorant. Andha means darkness. So Andha Tamishra involves considering death to be ultimate end. So even though he knows that, even though originally the spirit soul does not have birth, doesn't have death, but he, in the influence of Andha Tamishra, he starts thinking that death to be the ultimate end. So Prabhupada gives how people consider this. The atheists generally think that body is the self and that everything is therefore ended with the end of the body. This is the one way of influence of Andha Tamishra. They will think body is the ultimate, and once this body ends, everything ends. So whatever you want to do, whatever you want to enjoy, you do in this body. If someone is actually believing that, next, if I do lot of sinful activities, lot of sense gratification, I have to suffer in the next life, definitely he will not be happy to do the sense gratification. He cannot enjoy very freely. He will always be in the fear of what will happen in the next life. I'll have to suffer for all this sense gratification. So, but Andha Tamishra makes him think nothing is there after this body. Enjoy nicely to the full extent. So then comes after Andha Tamishra comes is third stage is tamas. So this Andha Tamishra ignorance is due to tamas. The condition of not knowing anything about the spirit soul is called tamas. This is the third ignorant layer cover. This material world is also generally called tamas because 99% of its living entities are ignorant of their identity as soul. That's why this material world is known as tamas, Bhautik Jagat. Almost everyone is thinking that he is this body. He has no information of the spirit soul. Guided by misconception, one always thinks this is my body and anything in relationship with body is mine. So from tamas comes next. He starts thinking that this body is mine. And for misguided living entity, sex life is a background of material existence. Actually, the conditioned souls in ignorance in this material world are simply guided by sex life, and as soon as they get the opportunity for sex life, they become attached to so-called home, motherland, children, wealth, and opulence. So from Andha, it becomes moha, attachment. So Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that what is that which is binding the living entity to this material world? What is that element? Just like sometimes, animals or even the prisoners, some prisoners are bound with a iron chain, iron shackle. So similarly, the living entity, the spirit soul, is bound to this material world using one shackle, heavy shackle, even heavier than the iron shackle. What is that? Sex life. That is the greatest, impediment to the spiritual life. Greatest impediment for the self-realization. Out of all the 5 regulative principles, 4 are very, very easy. Even, just like even in the Westerners, those who are addicted to eating meat, drinking wine, and gambling, for them it was not at all difficult to give up those things. Even in any devotee's case, even if unfortunately, even if a devotee he gives up Krishna consciousness, but still he will have some fear. So he will not easily take up meat eating or alcohol drinking. But something which becomes very difficult to control is what? This illicit sex life. So that's why it's known as a shackle or a bondage or a bonding agent to bind the living entity to this material world. If someone comes out of this shackle, then he's completely free. So that's what? From Andha, because of ignorance, So this attachment develops. Attachment develops because of what? Because of sexual attachment. As okay, then next the final one, fourth is what? Moha, that is attachment. Then after moha, as these attachments increase, moha, the illusion of the bodily concept of life also increases. Thus, the idea that I am this body and everything belonging to this body is mine also increases. And as the whole world is put into moha, sectarian societies, families, and nationalities are created, and they fight with one another. My caste, my country, my countrymen, my family members. One is Janasya Mohoyam Aham Mameti. So first one is Aham. Aham means my own body. I should take care of my body. So then that is known as selfishness. Then the second level is extended selfishness. What is that extended selfishness? After my body, my family members. Then beyond my family is my society, my caste. Then beyond my society, my country. So like that, living being, living entities increase their attachment. Janasya mohoye maham mameti. That's because of this moha. So mahamoha means to be mad after material enjoyment. This is the fifth covering, mahamoha. So mad after material enjoyment. Especially in this age of Kali, everyone is overwhelmed by the madness to accumulate paraphernalia for material enjoyment. So these definitions are very nicely given in Vishnu Purana, wherein it is said. So where this purport being explained. So Prabhupada is quoting, this is being taken from Vishnu Purana. So that Vishnu Purana verse says, Tamo viveko moha syad antakarana vibramaha mahamohastu vigneyo gramya boga sukaishana maranam hi anda tamishram krodha uchyate avidya pancha parvaisha pradurbhuta mahatmanaha. So in this purport, Prabhupada is mentioning a verse from Vishnu Purana which says that these five ignorant coverings of the spirit soul in this world. So because of this, what happens? So they completely forget about Brahma Vidya. They don't take interest in any of this Brahma Vidya subject matter, and living entity becomes engaged in Jada Vidya. So because of Jada Vidya, so he starts, the more he becomes expert in Jada Vidya, the more he learns Jada Vidya, he will become more puffed up. Just like scientists or scholars. So it's generally for a scholar, it's very, very difficult to convince or philosophically convince about Krishna consciousness to the scholars, because so much of jnana contamination will be there in their head. So much they have read. So to remove that jnana contamination and to make them devotees is very, very difficult. But whereas if someone is a very, very simple, plain-hearted fellow, very simple, he has not read much, he has not read too many complications of this Jada Vidya. So for him to explain and make him convince about Krishna consciousness is not so difficult. They easily take up. But whereas someone is a very scholarly person, because that scholar brings, kind of a pride in them. And they have so many reasons to not to accept Krishna consciousness. For that also they will give so many reasons and logics through Vedic literatures only. That's why someone has to be very simple-hearted. And then Prabhupada, when delivering lecture in this chapter, Prabhupada says that if someone really has to come out of these 5 different kinds of ignorant covers of ignorance, what one has to do? Chant Hare Krishna mantra nicely. So when you chant Hare Krishna mantra nicely, all the covers are removed. That is the process of Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Cheto Darpana Marjana, clearing the mirror of the heart. So soul has this thick coverings. So the more you chant, sincerely you chant, the coverings are removed. So it may take, we don't know what is the thickness of each cover. So but we have to chant. So chant Hare Krishna mantra nicely, hear that properly, same word. So then automatically all these covers are removed and spirit soul is awakened to its original eternal consciousness. What is that eternal consciousness? Jivera Swarupahoy Nithyera Krishna Das. So to come to that understanding, so one living entity really has to come out of all these things. At least now we know theoretically that these are the 5 coverings. So now we have to work on to come out of these coverings. So the only process is chanting. So I'll stop here. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की, जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की, निताई गौर प्रेमानंदे।